So imagine this scenario. You're eating all the right foods, you're consuming your greens, you're taking all the supplements that you need to, yet you're feeling bloated, you're feeling tired, you're feeling irritable, your skin is breaking out, your mood is dipping, and no matter how hard you try, something just doesn't feel right. You start wondering, is it stress? Is it hormones? Do I need more water? Do I need more sleep? What if the real reason lies deep within your gut? The gut is not just where digestion happens, it's a living ecosystem, home to trillions of microbes that communicate with your brain, they influence your immune system, and they affect your hormones. Research from the National Institute of Health has shown that 90% of serotonin, that's the happiness hormone, is produced in the gut, not in the brain. This means your mood, your focus, your energy is all deeply connected to what is happening in your digestive system. When your gut is out of balance, everything feels off. Your skin, your sleep, your sense of calm. But when it's in harmony, your body runs like it's meant to run, clear, strong, full of life. This is Anshu Bahanda from Wellness Curated, and today we're talking about gut health, your key to everyday wellness. From digestion and immunity to mood and metabolism, we will explore how the health of your gut influences every part of your life and what you can do to support it every single day. Welcome to Wellness Curated, where wellness is not fixed. It evolves as we do with every new experience in every season of our lives. In this episode, we're turning our focus inwards to one of the most fascinating and overlooked systems in the body, the gut. It's more than a place where food is broken down. It's the foundation of our energy, our immunity, and our emotional well being. The ancient systems understood this really well, like Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. And to help us understand this incredible inner world, I'm joined by Ashley Koff. She's a registered dietitian, integrated nutritionist, and founder of the Better Nutrition Program. She's recently written a book, and she's spent years helping people create lasting health by understanding their unique gut needs. Before we begin, a small request. Please subscribe to the podcast. It's free and it helps us to continue to bring you meaningful, science backed conversations that make wellness simpler and more personal. Thank you. So, Ashley, tell me, what does gut health actually mean? There's this buzzword that everyone is talking about at the moment about gut health, but most people think it's only about digestion. How will you explain it?
Yeah, I think that when we understand that the body is an operating system, and then we focus on the gut is the enabler of all of those operations, we start to understand the massive, complex, but actually very simple way that the gut works, throughout the body. Essentially, we think a lot about nutrition, and nutrition gives our body X. So if I eat protein, I have muscles. If I take in fat, I build hormones. But it's really the process of that the gut that when we take in that food, the gut turns it into nutrients and then enables it to get to the cells for usage. And at the same time, it's also a vetting system to say, is this actually even going to be okay for my body? And if it's not, then it's part of the elimination or even the immune system. So when we think about it in that way, we really aren't what we eat. In the States, we say you are what you eat, but we aren't. We are what we digest and absorb. And then we want to make sure that we're eliminating what we no longer use. So in my book, I actually break down digestion into 4 parts. So we look at motility, the digestive tract's ability to move because it moves things along, breaking down. So it takes, protein and it makes it into amino acids, or it takes fats and it makes it into the fatty acids, and then it might, help rebuild those. Absorption, which interestingly is not just about being absorbed through the lining of the digestive tract, but it's, through the oral cavity, and then also about hydration. And then the final
Right.
part would be elimination on that piece. So the gut might, when we think about our gut, we really want to think about it as the core of the operating system of the body.
Oh, wow. I like that. Core of the operating system.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are some of the early signs that our gut might be out of balance? You know, the sort that might appear and we'll ignore them, thinking there's something else or mistaking them for something else.
Yeah, I love that. And we've even been marketed to actually override or cover them up. So when we use deodorant or when we take mints, right, or we use mouthwash, like these things are actually they help us not notice, unfortunately, some of those early signals, and those can build up. So, and I actually have these assessment questions, and they're free for anyone to go through and do. But what we want to do is we want to pay attention to all the ways that our gut could be sending us those signals. So probably the most blatant ones are if things are not going, if they're going too quickly, or if they're going in the wrong
Mhm,
direction. So if you're not pooping, or if your poop doesn't look a certain way, or if it feels really hard to eliminate, then that's going to actually tell us that those are some early signals. If you are moving things through too quickly, if you have loose stools or diarrhea, that's going to be a key digestive sign. And then if you have reflux, if you notice things that are coming up, so they're going the wrong way, that's really important. A set of signals that we don't pay attention to are the ones that I talked to, that we tend to override or try to cover up, are the way that we smell. So underarm body odor, mouth changes
mhm,
in mouth odor, gas. So it's okay if we have gas, things can make
mhm.
us gassy. But when our gas smells a certain way, if it smells more putrid, more stinky, that's going to give us good information. And then probably where people don't associate it at all are all the issues with our skin. So if you have acne, if you have it on your shoulders, you have it on your backside, you have it on your face, if you notice changes in your skin, if you notice changes underneath your eyes, right, that's also going to tell us. And then some of the ones that we definitely, and even I think a lot of medicine doesn't associate it with the gut, are things like your blood sugar. So when your
Mhm.
blood sugar is going high or low, your gut is related. Your hydration
Right.
status. So when your hydration isn't better. And then even things like your hair, skin, and nails, your energy, your mood, the list can go on and
Oh,
on. And so
yes.
that's really
Yes.
important for us to understand, again, the potential, how the gut is core to our overall operating system.
Thank you for that, Ashley. I want to ask you about a couple of things you mentioned. One is, I mean, a lot actually, we grew up with this whole system of Ayurveda in India. I grew
Yes.
up in India. And we were told to actually look at our poop, which sounds disgusting. But you've just, confirmed that.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, there's
and
something
the,
called the Bristol scale that we look at,
right,
and I
right.
love Ayurveda. It's one of my favorite approaches to medicine, because what we look at in Ayurveda is we look at imbalances. So where
Hmm.
imbalances are showing up, and you can see that in your poop. Now, the one thing we don't need to do is we don't need to give too much attention to an initial change in our poop. Like, so there are going to be
Hmm.
days when we eat certain things, we might have looser poop, or it might be a little bit more
Hmm.
greasy, or it could be more dry. But, after 3 to 4 days, if something is occurring, so I usually have people assess this over the course of a week. I recall
Right.
even having a patient who came in, he had taken, this is years and years ago, so different technology, but he had taken a picture of his poop and brought it in to show me. He was so, this is like a 70-year-old man, and he was so proud of his poop, and said, look, and now there are even apps that have you like you can show your poop next to the app and see how it compares. So it is really important that we pay attention, for sure.
Now, Ashley, the other thing you mentioned was acne. Now, as we know, a lot of teenagers get acne.
Mhm.
How can you relate that to the gut? Is there something very quickly that you can tell me that they can do which will help them?
Well, so first let's understand the operating system, then let's look at what that means for what to do. And I want to be careful to never, when it comes to our gut, we want to understand the root cause, what's really going on. And so you don't want to just prescribe. So anyone listening, I don't want you to say, oh, I'm going to have my teenage son or daughter do this. What I want us to do is to do the assessment and then understand what's actually going on. But one of the things to note is that our sex hormones, so estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, when those are shifting, they throw our digestion off course. So there's an interrelationship to them. So number one, when we're teenagers, we might not be eating in a way that nourishes our gut. We also may be experiencing stress and other things that impact our gut. We haven't talked about that yet. But we do want to understand that when we have hormonal shifts, and puberty is a time of significant hormonal shifts, then our gut is going to be impacted. And equally, our gut shifting or things happening in our gut will impact our sex hormones, right? So what we do with teenagers is we want to understand, first of all, does my
Mm-hmm.
gut have what it needs to run better? So if I'm experiencing a tremendous amount of tension or stress, and sometimes this is very intentional. So I have a lot of teenagers who play sports. When you
Mm-hmm.
play sports, you have these bouts of very high intensity stress moments. That contracts the digestive system. It slows it down. It might even stop it for a time period. We need to make sure that we're relaxing those muscles. So that's where magnesium comes into play. So maybe they're not getting in enough magnesium. Maybe we need to look at food choices, and look at that piece. At the same time, we may also have been on, and we may actually use antibiotics because we're thinking those are better for our skin. Or we may be using birth control in the case of young women to help
Mm-hmm.
regulate cycles that are off. And those could be impacting the lining of the digestive tract. We could have been using also things like Tylenol or Advil or aspirin, which could also, be a factor. And then it's really important to note that, again, food choices for kids can sometimes be what
Mm-hmm.
we call more acid forming. So maybe more meat, more cheese, more sugar, and less of things like greens and alkaline formers, fruits like a kiwi or, a watermelon or an apple, things that will just be a little bit calmer to the system. And maybe they're having coffee and soda instead of having water, and they're dehydrated as a result. So it can be multifactorial, but before we start
Right.
down a path of medicating acne, whether that's topically or systemically, taking something in orally, we want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we start off with an assessment of the gut and then can look to do some repair work. And I will do things with amino acids. There's one particular amino acid like glutamine, which is
Mm-hmm.
so important for the lining of the digestive tract. And that and the right probiotics may actually help nourish the gut lining. You might still need medication, or you might still have bouts of, where you want to use something topically, but we aren't doing something that is also going to be harming to our gut and harming to our gut from a longer standpoint on that piece.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I also want to ask you about the gut-brain connection because
Mm,
it's talked about a lot that the gut is our second brain. Now, can you explain how the gut communicates with our brain
yeah.
and how this actually affects our mood, our focus, our mental health?
Yeah, so important. So what connects our brain to our gut, I mean, there are many pieces, but there's one nerve called the vagus nerve. And
Mhm.
we really want to understand that how important it is to nourish and nurture our vagus nerve. And because our vagus nerve is going to send signals from the brain to the gut, but it also is going to pick up things. One example of what it picks up are the hormones, the peptide hormones that I call our weight health hormones.
Right.
GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide, which we know is also now done as a mimic of a biosimilar hormone replacement, such as Ozempic or semaglutide, GIP, PYY, CCK. And then throughout the nerve, there's also a bunch of serotonin receptor sites and throughout our
Mhm.
digestive tract. And so when we have serotonin receptor sites in the gut, those are neurotransmitters. So there's a lot of communication that is occurring between the brain and the gut. And what we want to make sure is that the signals get to the gut in a timely manner. And then whatever the gut is sending out to the brain either gets to the receptor sites or gets to the receptor sites in the brain, in terms of that.
Right.
So when we think about that, it's not so much that our gut is actually the second brain, because I think they do things in my opinion, they do things very differently. The other part is the gut is so massive that it's hard to think
Mhm.
about it, as another brain. But I do think that they have a lot of similarities. One similarity is that the lining of the gut, the lining of the digestive tract, we call that the mucosal layer. It protects us. It's where our immune system, it's also where these hormones are deployed from. It's very metabolically active. It's responsible for helping make sure that nutrients are absorbed and go where they're supposed to go. And that goes throughout from our mouth all the way out through the anus. So it's like all along, it's that tubing. Well, in the brain, we also have the blood-brain barrier, and that
Mhm.
keeps certain things from passing, and it protects our brain cells, inside of the brain. So there are a lot of similarities, but what we're really trying to do is make sure the two dance together, right? That
Right.
anything that comes in, when I see something, when I smell something, when I taste something, that those signals get sent down to the gut. Otherwise, if we break them up and they don't get sent down there successfully, then the gut doesn't get the action required, that then doesn't send out the hormones, and the hormones don't get to the receptor sites. So it's a very, what I'll call, symbiotic relationship.
Right. And when people are trying to fix their gut, sometimes they'll cut out foods or a food group. Sometimes they'll take huge amounts of supplements. What would you say are some of the mistakes that people make? What would you like to warn people about that they
Yeah.
shouldn't do? What?
Yeah. Well, this is 25 years of helping people rebuild their guts. But it started off with myself. I had a belly as a young kid. It was like
Hmm.
cute until I was about 10. And then I was a fat kid. I got called to being
Hmm.
fat because I had a belly. And then I tried all
Oh,
these things. I tried all the dieting, right? I tried avoiding food, all food, right? And then I tried avoiding specific foods. It wasn't at a time where we were supplementing so much, but I really tried manipulating my diet with, manipulating my diet a lot. And then I also focused on exercise. And medically, they kept telling me there was nothing wrong with me. But my digestion, I had been on so many antibiotics that I
mhm.
had weakened the lining of my digestive tract, and I had almost no good bacteria in there. But the problem was each suggestion, eat fiber to feel full, or
Mhm.
don't have carbohydrates. When I stopped having carbohydrates, I no longer was getting in enough magnesium. That actually slowed my digestive tract even further. And I was really stressed out, and it didn't allow me any relaxation. So it contributed to panic attacks, which also
Gosh.
contributed to my gut feeling worse, right? Which ultimately led to my skin looking worse. And then I tried skin medication. So you can see where we can really go down a path of, avoiding things isn't the issue. I actually, at the end of a very unsuccessful, dramatic cleanse. I did a 7-day goat's milk only cleanse because some healer
Wow.
told me, yeah, it was crazy. Raw goat's milk, and I had 40 ounces a day, and she told me I had a
Mm.
worm in my body and I was going to kill the worm. And it sounds so insane, but I was so desperate. I had tried
Yeah, yeah.
everything. And so at the end of that, I ended up randomly meeting a gastroenterologist who was trained as more somebody who had some background in Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, who was
Mm.
trained a little bit more integratively. He said something really important to me, and this was at age 20 and changed the trajectory of my life and my career. He said to me, it's not what you're eating or what you're not eating. Your body, your gut doesn't have what it needs to run better. So, what I
Mm.
encourage each of you to do is to go out there and find out if your gut has what it needs to run better. Now, I'm so passionate about this. And today we have all of these tools, and each one of them has a publicist. So, each one of them is telling you that they are it, like they are the solution.
Mm.
There is no one tool that is a solution. No one thing was what repaired my gut or any of my patients. But what we need to do is we need to figure out what's actually going on for you. And that's why in this book, in Your Best Shot, and also free on my website, et cetera, we have digestive assessment that then tells us where to look. So as an example, the mistakes that people make are, number one, they'll be constipated and they'll try fiber.
Mhm.
And it turns
Mhm.
out that their constipation is actually that the gut isn't moving, and that we need to move the body more, or that maybe we need more magnesium for it to be able to relax. And maybe we need to adjust our calcium and our iron, or maybe we're taking in too much coffee and the coffee is actually moving things through, and we need to actually pull back on the coffee if we have loose stools, or these kinds of things. And if I'm not breaking protein down successfully, maybe I need to look at how I'm chewing. Maybe I need to double the amount of time that I'm chewing. Maybe I need to breathe more. Maybe I actually need to give my gut more digestive enzymes. Maybe I need to reduce a proton pump inhibitor. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of things. Many people today, and many practitioners, unfortunately, will also just do a gut test. They'll do a stool test, or they'll do an allergy test.
Right.
And it's actually, in the States, it's available for you to just order one yourself and then go get the
Mhm.
results. The problem with this is these do tend to pinpoint. They say, what is your body allergic to? What is your body intolerant to? And I will get people coming into my office. They've spent, anywhere from $100 to $600 on a test, and they're panicking. They're freaking out because the test showed them that they're allergic to everything that they're eating. When your gut is irritated, it doesn't like anything you're putting into it. So if you get test results that come back that match literally what you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or what you have most
Mm-hmm.
days, it's telling me that your gut is irritated, right? So then we have to
Right.
get at the core of irritation. We have to look at things like alcohol. Is alcohol contributing to inflammation in my gut or challenging my liver? Do I have a history of medications? What am I doing from a hormone standpoint? Could that be, impacting it? And how can I start that repair work? So, there are
Right.
several different models for how to repair the gut, but I think when you ask the question of what's the most important thing to avoid, the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
avoiding is thinking that there is a one size fits anyone or any gut solution. And the other thing that I challenge everybody to do, recognizing how often our gut is changing, you should be assessing your gut health, and I call it a digestive assessment, every single quarter, just like you're changing your clothes when
Right.
the
Right.
seasons change, so that you stay in front of it, and really identify when there are challenges. Yeah.
So, Ashley, you've given us so much information. Thank you for that in that one answer. So, I'm going to ask you bits. I'm
Sure.
going to ask you to explain bits. One, you said that when you were on antibiotics a lot, and that affected your gut. So, for people who are on antibiotics, and a lot of children for various things have been put on antibiotics. What would you say is the best way to help sort out the side effects of the antibiotics? Would you say it's to take a good probiotic pill? Would you say something
Great
else?
question. Yeah. So there's a difference, and I am not against antibiotics. They save lives. I'm against overusing them or inappropriate use of them, or not figuring out how to counter the side effects of the effects of the antibiotic. So number one, recognize that antibiotics, and these can be topical or oral, that they do go in and they get rid of anything that could be challenging. The intention is for
Mm-hmm.
them to get rid of the bad bacteria, but they also get rid of our better bacteria, of our good bacteria. So you
Right,
mentioned
right.
probiotics. So we can replace probiotics, but there's a caution in there. If we only replace the probiotics and we don't look at the gut lining, that
Mm-hmm.
mucosal layer, and we don't repair that, things like getting in glutamine, using things like bone broth, or, getting in good quality meats, or if we don't consume meats, really looking at things like our avocado and our hemp seeds and others that have nutrients and fatty acids that can help with the repairing the lining of the digestive tract. Antibiotics can increase inflammation in the gut, so we want to work on reducing that, or resolving that inflammation, and that's where fish can come into play. Really good quality fish and fish oils, and something called pro-resolving mediators, which is what's found in fish. It's where the omegas have gone through an enzyme reaction. So I look
Right.
at the key things for me typically with a digestive tune-up would be glutamine as an amino acid. It's the glue
Mm-hmm.
for the lining of the digestive tract. Magnesium to make sure we have motility. And then when we come in and look at the probiotics, we want to look at strain specificity. So
Right.
bifidobacteria is very grounding. Bifidobacteria is like the quarterback. So you want to make sure you're getting in some bifido, and bifido usually is not found in most foods, and certainly not in enough diversity and quantity. So that's one I often will supplement with. Then there are different strains of lactobacilli that may be helpful in that part. And then even in the lining of the digestive tract, we have things like Akkermansia, muciniphila, we have Clostridiums. So you start to get in a place where you're like, well, Ashley, like, which one do I take?
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't try to figure that out yourself. I do in my book
Yeah.
have some guidance, but this is where working with a practitioner is really helpful, because there
Mm.
are even beneficial yeasts. So something called, when we look at Saccharomyces boulardii, or we look at, that coming in, and that might be actually what we need to help you, especially if we're noticing more loose stool, or we've noticed, that things feel out of balance in that capacity. So just using a probiotic is not going to address it. And we can get probiotics in food, but the
Mm-hmm.
food sources also need to be ones that are better for our gut. So as an example, in India, you have beautiful yogurt. In the States, we
Right.
have a lot of yogurt that is very processed, highly pasteurized, comes with artificial or non-nutritive sweeteners in there, and may also be fat-free. So shifting how
Mhm.
our body responds to it, et cetera. And I'm not saying you don't have those in India, right? We have to, depending on where you are, we have to,
Yeah, yeah,
but we really want to look at that like great quality yogurt. But for some
yeah. We make
people,
yogurt at home, a lot of
you
us.
do.
So yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. But for some people, the casein really isn't well absorbed,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not better for
absolutely.
digestion.
Yeah.
So in that case, a supplement might be more helpful than say turning, directly to turning to the yogurt. So my advice in that space is also there's something really important to pay attention to. When you're on the antibiotic, you can absolutely do all these things to nurture you, and you're trying to help your body feel better. So alkaline formers, lemons, limes,
Hmm.
olive oil, like, really, really supporting the body. But for about 6 weeks after, you really want to limit your intake of the acid formers, in particular added
Hmm.
sugars, because the sugar feeds, it's the easiest food for bad bacteria. So if you can pace yourself to restore your gut and give your gut the time for those new bacteria to grow and to thrive and to root, by not putting a lot of added sugar into the body, which would feed the bad bacteria, that's going to be better for you. And if those 6 weeks after the antibiotic, you can also recognize that you're more likely to take in bad bacteria, and just practice simple things. Take your shoes off when
Hmm.
you come in the house, wash your hands, use, look at, like, if you're, out, and like I go to a lot of fitness centers out, and I might share a mat, or I might share
Hmm.
machines or things like that, or I'm traveling, I might wrap a scarf around my neck, around my mouth, or wear a
Hmm.
mask, different things like that to try to reduce your exposure to other bacterias. That's going to really help you longer term from a healing standpoint.
So when we're talking about, I was going to ask you about three simple things
Yeah.
that you can do to make a real difference. So would you say that some of these are when you're saying when you're out and about? One of them you said was cut sugar, right?
Yeah, yeah. But
What
don't
else?
replace it. Okay, so so here's what I want to be clear. Cut the added sugar, reduce the added sugar. Look, I love Manuka honey, a little bit of maple syrup, that kind of thing, but
Hmm.
1 to 2 teaspoons in a day is going to be the absolute max for you. And when you're immediately post antibiotic, I don't recommend any, but don't replace it with non-nutritive sweeteners. Don't replace it with
Hmm.
stevia or monk fruit. Go to your foods, your sweet
Hmm.
potato, your oranges, your apples, your pears, use food, cinnamon, things that help things naturally taste sweet. So that's number one. Number two is to actually optimize your hydration so that you're actually supporting your body's ability to bring nutrients around the body and to eliminate, what isn't better. So that's pit stopping about every 3 hours for 8 to 10 ounces of water. And it may
Hmm.
be adding an electrolyte, adding maybe a pinch of salt and some lemon to your water, or maybe an electrolyte supplement, depending on how else you get in minerals on that piece. And then the third one, as I mentioned, well, the third one would be tough. Remember I said to be like
Okay.
more like conscious of what's in the environment, but I'll tell you, the tried and true is getting enough sleep. So if you
Right.
focus on your sleep, but what's interesting is a lot of us are mouth breathers at night. So one of the things that's very popular now is to actually do a mouth taping. And a lot of
Taping,
times,
yes.
yeah, immediately following, being sick, like not when you're coughing or, that, because I don't want it to be dangerous for you. But once you feel better, you may want to employ that mouth taping, or do what you can to have your room, your environment, be a little bit more helpful to try to reduce some of that mouth breathing and try to really learn to do nose breathing on that part. Yeah.
Okay. So you said cut down on sugar,
Hmm.
uh, try and do nose breathing and hydration. Those are the
Hmm.
three things which could make a difference to your gut
Hmm.
on
Yeah.
an everyday basis.
Yes.
What about foods? Can you tell me what are the best kind of foods to support the gut?
Yeah.
And what do you say would harm you, even though, there's foods that people think are healthy, but they actually may not be?
Yeah. I will say that, so number one, every gut is individual, and every culture, like what your body may resonate with, and also what's delicious to you, may be a little bit different. But we can just draw a line in the sand. all the
Mm-hmm.
foods that exist in nature themselves, those are going to be good for your body. There's a role for them. So all the
Mm-hmm.
different colors, there's a role for them. What's not better for you are colors that are made in a chemistry lab. So the synthetic artificial colors, and the reason for that is they don't bring you any of the good antioxidants, excuse me, any of the plant nutrients that we find in all the colors in nature. On the other hand, those things that are made in the lab, the body may get irritated by, right? They may be problematic. But things like meats and cheeses and dairy,
Mm-hmm.
like in the right quantities for your body, though, if they're good quality, your body should know how to use them. And so the whole variety is out there. We all need a variety of plants. So every one of us needs to be plant-based. The question is, do you need to be plant monogamous? Do you need to get rid
Mm-hmm.
of all animal products? And I don't agree with that. I think, around the world and in individual homes, some people really like it. They find it very efficient. They find it very enjoyable to get in their proteins, their fats, et cetera, from things like, lamb and goat and cow and sheep and, all of these different, whether it's the meats or, the dairy. That's fine. We just have to have that counterbalance or that foundation in plants and be able to get that in. Now, the second place where there's an issue is if you take something in nature and you
Mm-hmm.
transform it by way of
Yes.
processing. So
Yes.
if I take wheat as an example, which everybody's like, oh, gluten, stay away from it. Okay. We probably have too much gluten. Like we've really hybridized in the States, especially our wheat. But we can have our wheat where it has a lot of gluten. But really, what's more harmful about that is number one, what's been sprayed on it. Whether there's glyphosate or there's other environmental toxins that have been used as part of the growth. But really, when you process it and you go from a shaft of wheat in nature to white refined flour, or what we call enriched flour, which really
Mm-hmm.
gets me going, where
Yeah.
it's had all the nutrients removed from it, you see an 80% decrease in magnesium alone, right? So we see these changes. We see that what was protective about the wheat, the fiber in there, the essential fatty acids, the proteins, that's all meant to be in wheat, in that flour, and it's gone, right? And many of the
Mm-hmm.
trace minerals, the small amounts of minerals. So the key thing to look at, I mentioned this with yogurt before, when we take full fat yogurt and we go take it through the processing of where we pull out all of the fat from it, we
Mm-hmm.
change the way that it works in the body.
Yes.
So
Yes.
one of my favorite people, as an old podcast partner of mine, Robin O'Brien, she, said in her very early on, because she was really exploring children and allergies, because she had a child that had a ton of allergies. And she said, are we
Right.
allergic to food or what's been done to it? And I think that's a
Yes.
really good line for us to look at. So instead of beating up on like the potato or trying to determine, are chia seeds better than flax seeds? That's not the issue. It's what have we
Mm-hmm.
done to them, by the time
Yes.
they're going into
Yes.
our mouth.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's a very, very important point about how we're processing them and exactly what has been done to it. Because we were meant to be able to consume what nature has. We're not meant to be, I mean, people did all through the generations, people have just consumed it. But I also want to ask you about stress. I know my gut goes for a 6 when I'm stressed.
Yes.
How exactly does that work? And I'm someone who does yoga, I do pranayama, I do breath work, I do meditation, and even then, my gut goes for a 6. Do you have any suggestions as to how, when life gets overwhelming,
Mhm.
how can I calm my gut?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have not done a better job of is not explaining the relationship between stress and our gut, because I think all of us would probably live a little bit differently if we understood it, that well. So remember I talked about the vagus nerve. So when our
Mm-hmm.
vagus nerve feels unsafe, and there are at least 5 different ways. My colleague, Dr. Nawaz Habib, wrote this book, Upgrade Your Vagus Nerve, and he talks about 5 ways 5 forms of safety. So we all have traumas from our lived experience. We may be experiencing acute traumas, like in the moment. Our vagus nerve may not have enough of the nutrients. Our body may have a limited amount, and so our vagus nerve isn't being fed. But our vagus nerve may also be experiencing the stress that we're taking in from our own thoughts, right, or from our sight, or from our experience. When that happens, messages don't get where they're supposed to go. So they don't go from the brain to the gut, or what the gut is supposed to secrete and take to the brain or take elsewhere in the body, that doesn't happen effectively. So that's one effect. The second effect is when we experience stress in a cell, we have calcium that comes into the cell, and in our cells, we should have magnesium, and that magnesium should kick the calcium back out. When stress occurs and calcium comes into the cells, that creates tension. So think of like a flexed muscle. When magnesium kicks it out, it relaxes. That's how our heart muscle pumps, and that's also how our digestive tract moves. So whenever you're experiencing stress, your digestive tract is not moving effectively. And then research has also shown that when we are experiencing stress, that the types of bacteria that are able to thrive versus the ones that don't survive in our gut and in our gut lining, and also that stress impacts the leakiness of our gut lining. So it is so many different places in the body. I haven't even touched on, the immune system and all of the other pieces that occur as a result. So what we've done is we've said with stress, we've talked about how to do these behaviors, and we tend to think about like breathing or meditation or other things very much like we think about exercise. I'm going to do them for 30 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, like once in the day. But the reality is that our body is experiencing stress all throughout the day, right? Some of it is even great stress of our own making. I could be really excited and nervous about doing this podcast, and I could be stressed out, or I could go to the gym and work out really hard, and that produces stress. So we want to remember that all of these stress experiences are constantly happening. So the number one thing that you can do, in my opinion, is to number one, decode your body's signals for elevated stress. So for me, it's that my shoulders go up. I start to breathe from about here on up. I am not breathing in my belly. I talk very fast and I'm not taking in a breath on that part. So when those things are happening, I start to notice that I'm more stressed, right? And I'll notice it too in my belly. I might feel a little bit more bloated or like just a little distended, in that regard. So when those things are happening, and I should also mention, I get a little bit of a racy mind, and I'm maybe not the nicest to myself, right? So when those things are happen, I pause. I do something called a stress check-in. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is my stress experience right now? And I've defined what a 1 looks like for me. I've defined what a 10 looks like for me. And I kind of have a sense of like what a 4, 5, or 6 looks like. If I'm a 7 or greater, I have to do an intervention in that moment. I need to laugh. I need to do some intentional breathing, like maybe 3 rounds of 4, 7, 8 or box breathing. I need to maybe, pet the dog or, release some oxytocin. I need to step away from the computer. And this is a really important one. I need to acknowledge that the thing that is inspiring stress in me right now is something that is out of my control. So many of us today, with the way the world is and with the way we have access to information, we're stressed about things over which we have almost no or have absolutely no control. We need to take those and we need to like move them away, like we're literally moving dirt away off of a floor. And we want to try to bring our stress back down. So like, what do I do to help my shoulders lower, right? Is the question. Or how do I, change the pacing of things and be able to do that?
Right.
We have to do that throughout the day. So I challenge and invite everybody to really think about your body like a race car. So a race car it starts off, it has everything that it needs, and it runs 3 laps. I'll just say 3 laps. It runs a couple of laps. It stops and you pit stop and it gets refreshed, right? The whole team comes around it and it refreshes everything. And then it goes and does a couple laps. So I invite you to think about your day in about 3-hour increments, and every 3 hours at minimum, check in on your stress, reset your breathing, have some water, do some movement, nourish your body with something that's nutrient balanced on that part. Step away from what you're doing and come back to it. Any of these things, so that what doesn't happen is by 5 or 6 p.m. in your day, you have an accumulation. You might have started off with a great meditation, but if you're not checking back in on your stress until 5 p.m., your whole day, your digestion has gone suboptimally functioning. And that's a lot of why we maintain belly weight. Our immune system gets suppressed and we get sick. We don't sleep as well, all of these things because we don't end up dealing with them, later in the day on that part. Yeah.
So, Ashley, I have 2 more questions for you, which we'll address very quickly because we're kind of running out of time.
Okay.
One is hormones in the gut. I'd love you to talk to me, especially for women, during their cycle time or during menopause. How does the gut get affected? How does that affect the hormones? And how do the hormones then affect the gut again? So the relationship between them.
Yeah. So first of all, remember that in the lining of our digestive tract, we make our weight health hormones, GLP-1, GIP, PYY, CCK. These are really important because their sole job is to go tell other hormones to go to work. So they do things like they go to our brain and tell leptin and ghrelin, and so they affect our appetite and our hunger. They go to our,
Mhm,
our blood sugar and they tell insulin and glucagon. They go to our bone and they tell hormones and nutrients, and impact our bone building. They go to our muscles, et cetera. So they're playing a very important role. And when we have a suboptimal amount where we have like too much or too little of things like
mhm,
estrogen or testosterone or progesterone, our gut isn't functioning better. Remember, it is the core operating system. So in that time period, what will end up happening is, as a perimenopausal woman, or even as a young girl or a young boy, you might see that you're putting on belly weight, right? And
mhm,
maybe you were thin before, but now you have a belly, or maybe you've battled your weight your whole life and you're like, oh my gosh, my belly is even worse right now. Or for the first time ever, you notice that your blood sugar is elevated, or that your cholesterol is off. So these are signals that your what we tend to refer to as your sex hormones, but they do so much more in the body. Your sex hormones and your weight health hormones are not working better. So what we want to do is come back in and come to the gut. That's why I love this conversation that we're having. Every time I'm working with a perimenopausal woman or a man who is experiencing low testosterone, I'm always coming back to the gut and I'm building up from the gut. And then if we use hormone replacement therapy, if we realize, you know what, my body's not able to produce enough of this and I want to come in and use that, then my body is going to be able to receive it and also eliminate it. Now, I do also need to support detoxification. We don't have to get into that,
mhm,
but it's very important to make sure that we understand that part of our body's ability to eliminate things is our ability to change toxins that are fat soluble into ones that are water soluble and can be eliminated. So when you think of your sex hormones, think of them as tied to your gut function. They will affect your gut function and they are affected by your gut function. So really the first place for you to focus is on that optimization of your gut.
mhm. Wonderful. And my last question to you is, if you were going to design your own wellness algorithm for gut health, what would be the three core pillars you'll include for better digestion and for overall vitality?
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's difficult to say three. You've just met me and I've said like we got to assess everything, you know. But I think the most important thing would be to timestamp it. And what I mean by that is that the algorithm would be to wake up every day. And there are some things I look at every day, some things I look at monthly, some things quarterly, but to ask my body and pick up on the signals, what's going on with my body, and then make the choices that align with what my body needs on that part. So instead of waking up every day and being like, every morning I have these supplements and every day I have this espresso and every day I do this, really lean into what is better for my body today. What does it need? So that's number one. Number two, I learned this. I am not good at this. So this is a good one for me to listen to and take my own advice. Set and keep the same bedtime every night and try to have it be about 2 to 3 hours after you've finished eating, at least at least that
Mhm,
range. So the key thing with setting the same bedtime is that even a variance of about 30 minutes will impact how well your body actually recovers. So if you go to bed at 10 o'clock on the weekends and the weekdays every single night, over the course of 3 or 6 months, you will notice a change in your body's ability to do all its recovery work, in that piece. And then the third one is something you might not have expected from me, but I think some of the worst choices that we make for our body are because they are not ones that are delicious to us in the moment.
ah,
Somebody else has told us that they are healthy for us or they are better
yeah.
for us. So delicious might be an incredible workout. Delicious might be saying, yes, I want the burger, or yes, I want the chocolate, et cetera. Now, we still have to employ principles of better nutrition, but on a scale of 1 to 10, if something isn't delicious to me, if it's not a 7 or greater, what ends up happening is the hormones in our body don't get the messages. We don't go from our brain to our gut, and we don't tend to feel full. We don't tend to feel satisfied, right? If I'm told that I should do a workout because it's going to help me get skinny, and I go and I don't enjoy myself while I'm doing my workout, or I stay in my head, like all of this, it's just not better. So when we make choices that really feel delicious to us in the moment, our body actually is going to respond more favorably.
So you're saying go for things that give you joy. I
Joy,
agree. I
joy.
totally
Yes,
agree with you.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Deliciousness and joy are
yes.
totally tied to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to do something fun.
Okay.
It's called a gut feel. So I'm going to ask you a question, and it's like a rapid fire round, and you
Okay.
say yes, please, or no, thank you, and tell me why very quickly.
Okay.
Coffee on an empty stomach.
No, thank you.
Why?
Too acidic, and I typically like to have some fuel in my body before I slam it into overdrive.
Probiotics in a capsule or on a plate?
Ooh, both. Let's say
Okay.
both on that part.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
why?
Well, the probiotic on a plate may not actually give me the strain specificity that I need at a particular time. And what stuck
Yes,
me with
you
a
explained
capsule,
that.
yes,
Yeah.
with a capsule, sometimes I like a powdered probiotic too, so but a
Yeah.
supplemental one can help. Yeah.
Okay. Late night snacking.
No, thank you.
Why?
Too much digestive work for my body. And so as a result, it's not able to do the recovery work it needs to do while sleeping.
Daily kombucha.
No, thank you.
Ooh. And why is that?
So the quality of probiotics in kombucha is it's wild. Like we just don't know. There's so much variety in there, but the bubbles and the sugar and the little bit of alcohol aren't better for my digestion. They might be fine for yours, but they're not better for my digestion.
Listening to your gut, physically or emotionally.
That depends. The problem is that if your gut is dysregulated and we listen to it, we may not make good choices. When our gut is aligned and better and optimized, listening to it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. That was a fascinating conversation. Very practical. I'm sure a lot of people will find it very useful. I think Ashley's reminded us that gut health is not just about digestion, it's about balance between nutrition, rest, food, emotion. I love the bit about the emotion. And between how we eat, how we live, and just between who we are. So thank you for that. What a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
When we take care of our gut, we take care of everything else. Our energy, immunity, our mood. It truly is the foundation of everyday wellness. If this episode made you see your body in a new light, share it with someone who might need the reminder. And don't forget to subscribe. It's free and it keeps you part of this growing community that believes true wellness always begins within. I'm Anshu Bahanda. Stay curious, stay kind to yourself, and keep rewriting your own wellness algorithm, one mindful choice at a time. Thank you.